And so, Jen, whenever you're ready, we can kind of jump into those 5 tips that you mentioned in the beginning of the conversation.
Okay, yes, awesome. So just to emphasize, these are tips going beyond the general PM interview framework, which you can read about in Cracking the PM Interview and PM Lesson. It's all of Steven's great content. So this is the stuff that I think you should add on top of that. So I think first, I would say talk about what you know. And I think people underestimate how much unique perspective that they have in their experiences. And that could be in previous internships, previous side projects you've done, previous life experience, like how you grew up, where you grew up, how you interacted with your parents, with friends, or even sports. Really take that and use that as kind of the jumping board to add a little bit of flavor in the feature or product that you end up designing. So definitely talk about what you know. Second is be creative as you propose your features or products. So this is something that I've noticed when I interview other people at Microsoft, is that people tend to give kind of the same answers. And if you think about it from the interviewer point of view, I'm sitting there and I probably sit and listen to 6 people come in and do their interviews. And if 3 out of the 6 give me the very same answer, that's not exciting and not unique, and quite frankly, not as memorable as doing something more creative. So I think how people should approach this is when you get to the point where you actually propose different features. So I would say that if you go with 3, the first one is the most realistic, kind of base. Everyone understands it. You get more creative and unique as you go along. So you show the user, or you show the interviewer, that you can propose something that is technically achievable, that is actually realistic, but you also show off how creative you can be and also kind of how you see the world. So this is a chance for you to actually, I guess, impose on them how you think about things. Third, KPIs. That is so critical and something that people always forget to do in an interview setting, because in their head, it's not like you have the dashboards measuring the success of this product, because it's hypothetical. So you need to make sure you answer the question of how you measure success, but also what is your unique KPI. So this is a key because everyone goes after number of users, how basically number of users, how much money people make, so on and so forth. But what is a unique KPI that you can kind of add to it? So for example, when I was working on my fashion tech startup back in school, we could not compete with the big fashion retailers of the world in terms of number of users, in terms of money getting paid or whatever. But we could compete on is how per session, how long someone spent on our website. And that we were doing better than some of the top players in our field. So that was a unique KPI that we can actually win above all these other startups. And this actually applies to your PM interview as well. So think about what your unique KPI is and how you'd use that to measure your success amongst all the kind of more normal KPIs. Fourth is, if you're technical, show off your technical chops. And by what I mean by that is when you're describing your product, incorporate different, you can incorporate your technical jargon or incorporate new technology there. If you're an AI expert or NLP, talk about how you're going to use Markov model and how you actually implement this. Just a brief sentence here and there scattered throughout your interview really kind of helps kind of convey to the interviewer in a subtle way that, hey, I'm legit and know technically how this would work, and that's something that I want to convey to you. And then fifth, I think this kind of goes back to the first point about talking about what you know, but fifth is show off your experience by incorporating your learnings from previous experiences, such as internship, classes, side projects, as data. So basically, you don't have the time to do a market research on your user that you're going after. You don't have the time to actually run and do user surveys. But if you had done it before, if you went over a similar user market, target market in an internship, use that data point. Hey, I actually worked at this company. Yeah, it's not in interior design. It was in healthcare, but we went after new grads as well. here's how I know that this is what they think like. And that way you're conveying to the interviewer, hey, like I have really great previous experience that you saw on my resume, but here is actually how I use that to think. Because at the end of the day, these 5 tips, all these mock interviews are great, but when you're actually a PM at a company, you're hired to bring in your experience. Like Microsoft hires people, you think that you're just a cog in a big wheel. That's not the case. Like you actually can make an impact and they're hiring you for your unique perspective. That's why they didn't just like pick the next person down the list. So what you can bring to the table, you should, and you should reflect that in your actual interview as well.
That was a great list of questions, Jen. Great list of tips, Jen. I love the idea of kind of how do we push it even further and weaving in your personal experience, which is just something you did in the interview that we just did. Weaving that in was like really effective, I think, from an interviewer's perspective, because it's like, oh yeah, this person has kind of a unique take on this whole thing and has like kind of insights that I might not have as a manager or I might not have as a company, and you can add actual value to the team as opposed to just kind of repeating what the 3 other people said that day.
Yeah, and the bonus is like, if you can teach them something new that day, they'll remember it. Like that's something that I've noticed when I interview people. I'm like, oh, I didn't actually know that about football. Like it's unrelated, but like that, they incorporated that into their interview. And I was like, oh, I remember them.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point, especially for the favorite product question too. When like you're kind of just like, what's your favorite product and why? And you're given an open door. And really the best answers to that question are kind of saying something that I maybe don't previously believe or I didn't previously know. And they convince me of something. I'm like, oh, wow, interesting. Like I didn't realize that this product is only successful because of this particular feature, or like this decision was such an impactful one for that product's development. And so I think convincing the interviewer of something new and providing new information and novel information is really, really, really helpful.
And
it's
also,
a really good tip.
Yeah, I think that's also something where you could pick a very generic user, or you can pick a very generic favorite product. Like I would say a new grad of millennial is very generic user. Like everyone's going after them. I would say like picking iPhone or something like that is a very generic product that a lot of people can probably think of. But it doesn't necessarily make it a bad user target group or bad favorite product. It's how you actually talk about it, and what you say is something new is what matters.
Totally agree. Yeah, it's just like, can you say an interesting, like insightful comment about that segment, or and it's okay if you can't, and then you don't have to pick that segment, and you can pick one that you feel comfortable with. But relying on that instinct of finding an insightful comment is a really good one. Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, I think we're wrapping up with the session today. But thank you, Jen, so much for kind of being with us and not only doing a mock interview, but also providing some awesome tips for people interviewing for PM roles. PM lesson listeners and viewers right now, hope you guys enjoyed our session. And as always, you can find more great content like this at pmlesson.com.